The Friday the 13th series never had a really good movie. Ever. It just didn't. Don't get me wrong. I love Jason. Jason is a great character. I grew up with Jason. The first Friday the 13th movie came out the year I was born. So, and there was a Friday the 13th movie every single year until I was 8 years old. One of the first horror movies I saw in the theater was Jason Goes to Hell. Um, but let's face it, they're always sort of the same movie every time, with one exception. And I'm talking about the core eight the Paramount Friday the 13th movies before New Line took it over, because New Line did, for better or worse, do a different thing every time with Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, Freddy versus Jason, and to a lesser extent the remake. The remake is basically just another Jason movie. But there's one exception in that first 8 movies that nobody really seems to like except for me. I am talking about Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. This is Volume 2 of my Friday the 13th collection, which has 7, 8, 9, 10, the remake, and Crystal Lake Memories, documentary about the whole series. Yeah, everybody just says, oh, it's just Carrie versus Jason. Sort of, yeah, but, that's an interesting mashup that to me proved to be far more interesting than Freddy versus Jason, which we'll get to. Yeah, this is a fairly good Friday the 13th movie. It's got your standard stupid teenagers go into the woods and get themselves killed plot. But it throws into the mix this psychiatrist who is bringing a mother and her troubled daughter to Crystal Lake so that the daughter can face her fears and everything. And the daughter has these telekinetic abilities. And yeah, for most of the movie, it's a standard Friday the 13th movie. It does what every Friday the 13th movie does. Jason goes around, he hacks kids up, rinse, repeat. But to me, what this one gets right, and I think it gets really right, is that when you get to the final girl, she's not just running away into the woods. She has the ability to fight back, and to fight back in a way that is a real challenge to Jason. He can't just run up to her with a machete and chop her in two. She can fight back. She can and bring down a whole house on top of him, or like just really wail on him, like knock him down with these telekinetic abilities. And for once, I think the actress is pretty good. I'm sorry, I don't know her name off the top of my head, but she's a pretty good final girl in the movie. Everybody else is, again, sort of standard Friday the 13th characters. The psychiatrist has kind of more sinister motives, but you see him coming a mile away. It's not like you're shocked or surprised by it. But yeah, there's not a lot to say. I mean, there's not a lot to say about any of the Friday the 13th movies. 1 through 8, they basically made the same movie 8 times, with slight twists in 7 and an even slighter twist in 8, because 8 is just, even though it's called Jason Takes Manhattan, it's mostly on a boat. There's like 3 shots of him in Manhattan, and then there's like mostly shot in Canada. And then you get, like I said, into the New Line movies, which, while different from the core 8 movies, are not particularly good movies. there was always a charm, a simplicity to the Friday the 13th movies. The character of Jason, the best sort of psychological analysis I've heard is that Jason represented the AIDS crisis, you know, which kids today don't really, they don't know that this was a big deal. This was like COVID in a apocalyptic kind of a scale where people were really worried, like, holy shit, this is going to wipe out millions and millions and millions of people. And it was transmitted through drugs and sex. And when does Jason show up? When the kids are doing drugs and having sex. So it's an interesting theory. I mean, really, he predates the AIDS crisis because, like I said, part 1 came out in 80. And that didn't really become a big deal, the AIDS crisis, until like 83, 84. And so it's an interesting theory about him. I mean, I've heard he's like the Great White in Jaws. He's the unstoppable force that you can't reason with, that you can't bargain with. But really, you could say that about Michael Myers. You could say that about Freddy Krueger. With Pinhead, you can kind of bargain a little bit. But most of these slasher characters, they have their thing instead of a personality. Michael Myers and Jason, and to some lesser extent Leatherface, the sort of mute slasher killers, they didn't have, they were interchangeable except for a few minor little quirks. What made them icons was the time that they were from. And I think a lot of that you had to be there. You had to really be there and be into it at that time. They keep trying to bring them back. You know, remaking Jason and Freddy and Halloween and now Candyman. And they can't ever seem to crack the code. And they can't even seem to get the remakes off the ground a lot of the time. It's been 11 years since the last Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I think it's been 12 or 13 since the last Friday the 13th movie. They could never figure out the Hellraiser remake. And I think the thing is that they are of their time. And so it might be best to let them go if you can't think of something new to do with them. One thing that I wouldn't mind seeing if they brought Jason back in a new movie was some sort of connection to the New Blood. I think it is the most interesting of all the Friday the 13th movies. I think part 6 has got the atmosphere of like a Universal horror movie, and that's super cool. Everybody goes on and on about part 4. I find part 4 to be just very, very standard. It's you know, one of those movies where you go, oh wait, that's the one with Corey Feldman, and that's the only thing, and Crispin Glover dances weird. That's the only thing you remember about that movie. Because otherwise it's like part 3 and part 6 and part 8 and all the others where it's just, he goes, he kills teenagers. Part 7 gives it that little twist, and for me, that's what makes it interesting. So I'm going to go 3 stars for Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. If you haven't seen it, if you've been turned off by people's opinions of it, give it a chance. If you like Friday the 13th movies, personally for me, this one is the best.
The worlds.
Sort of gave myself the challenge of, okay,